This man loves you so much, but he has another woman who... Wait, pause for a second. Something quiet, something almost invisible has just shifted. And it didn't happen with noise. It didn't come with a sign or a warning. It happened in the middle of an ordinary moment. Maybe he was sitting somewhere familiar, doing something routine, and then, there it was. A feeling he couldn't name right away. A pull he's been trying to push past for longer than he'd like to admit. Something about you moved through him again, and this time, he couldn't just set it aside like he usually does. That's why you're here right now. Because on some level you already feel it. If this message speaks to your heart, comment "I receive this love," like the video, and subscribe for more. Now let's talk about where he actually is right now. Not physically, but emotionally. Because there's a version of this situation that people on the outside would look at and think they understand. They'd say he made his choice. They'd say he moved on. They'd point to the other woman and say, "See, he's fine, he's moved forward." But that's the surface. And the surface is almost never the whole truth. Here's what's actually happening underneath it. And this is the part most people never get to see. He's in a relationship, that's real. He's present in it, at least physically. He shows up, he goes through the motions, he does what's expected of him. But there are moments, specific, quiet, sometimes unexpected moments, where he goes somewhere else in his mind, not on purpose. He doesn't sit down and decide to think about you. It's more like something catches him off guard. A song, a smell, the way light falls at a certain time of day. Something small and completely unrelated to you that somehow, inexplicably, brings you back. And he doesn't fully understand why that keeps happening. Stay with this, because there's a deeper emotional layer here that matters. The thing about the other woman, and this is important, is that she came into his life at a moment when he was trying to close a door. Not because that door needed to be closed, but because keeping it open felt too painful, too uncertain, too much like standing in the middle of a hallway, waiting for something that might never come. So he stepped into something new, something that felt like forward motion, and for a while that felt like the right call. It felt like healing, it felt like clarity. Except it wasn't quite that. Because healing doesn't leave a quiet ache in the back of your chest when someone mentions a name. Healing doesn't make you pause mid-sentence when you catch yourself about to bring up a memory you're not supposed to have anymore. Healing doesn't make you scroll past a location, or a photo, or even just a color, and feel something shift in your stomach before you've even consciously registered what you saw. That's not healed, that's buried. And buried things have a way of resurfacing, especially when the life you've built on top of them starts to feel a little hollow in places. This is where things quietly begin to shift for him. He hasn't said any of this out loud. That's important to understand. He's not sitting across from the other woman confessing confusion. He's not telling his friends he has doubts. He's keeping it contained, the way people do when they don't fully trust what they're feeling yet, or when they're afraid that naming it will make it too real to ignore. But internally, there's a conversation happening, a slow, private, sometimes uncomfortable conversation with himself. It sounds a little like this. Why does this still feel unfinished? That's the question sitting at the center of everything right now. Not loudly, not urgently, just there. Like a tab left open on a screen you keep meaning to close but somehow never do. He's not unhappy in the traditional sense. That's the confusing part, even for him. He's not in a bad situation. He's not being mistreated. Life looks okay from the outside, but there's a difference between a life that looks okay and a life that feels complete. And somewhere in the quiet moments, usually the ones right before sleep, or early in the morning before the day fully starts, he feels that difference, and in those moments he thinks about you, not dramatically, not with tears or longing the way it might look in a movie. Just a thought, a presence, a kind of emotional gravity that he hasn't been able to explain or fully shake, no matter how much time has passed. What happens next is subtle, But it matters more than you think. There's a memory that's been coming back to him lately. It's not even a significant one. That's what makes it strange to him. It's not some grand moment, not a milestone, not a dramatic conversation. It's something small. Something that probably didn't even feel important when it happened. Maybe it's the way you laughed at something that wasn't that funny. But you laughed anyway, and it was completely genuine. Maybe it's something you said once, that he dismissed in the moment, but that stayed with him, without his permission. Maybe it's a moment where you understood something about him, without him having to explain it, and he realized it later, too late, how rare that actually was. That's the memory surfacing right now. That specific, quiet, almost ordinary moment that somehow holds more weight than he expected. And the reason it keeps coming back isn't because he's stuck in the past. It's because that memory is pointing at something. It's his own emotional system trying to tell him something he hasn't fully been willing to hear yet. You don't need to force anything right now. Just feel this. Here's the part that gets complicated. And real. He cares about the woman he's with. This isn't a story where she's a villain, or where he's using her, or where nothing between them is genuine. It's more nuanced than that, and life usually is. He stepped into that relationship with real intention. He tried to be present. He tried to let it be what it needed to be. But trying is not the same as arriving, and presence is not the same as peace. There's something that's been sitting in the space between him and the woman he's with. Something unspoken. Something both of them probably sense, but neither has fully named. A kind of tension that comes not from conflict but from incompleteness. Like two puzzle pieces that fit well enough to stay together, but not quite perfectly enough to feel finished. He's been telling himself that's just what relationships are, that no connection is perfect, that what he had before with you was just idealized in his memory, that the ache he feels is just nostalgia, not truth. But here's what he's slowly beginning to realize, and this is the part he didn't expect. Nostalgia fades. What he feels hasn't. This is the part they're still trying to understand. If you've felt this shift too, if something in this has landed somewhere real inside you, then you already know what it means. You've probably felt it on your end too. That quiet sense that something is unresolved. That feeling like the story isn't actually over, even if the last chapter seemed like an ending. You're not imagining it, and neither is he. He's in a place right now where two things are true at the same time, and he's trying to figure out how to hold both of them. He genuinely doesn't want to hurt anyone. He genuinely doesn't want to be the person who disrupts a life he's already built. But he also genuinely cannot keep pretending that something isn't pulling at him. Quietly, consistently, undeniably. The question isn't whether he feels it anymore. That question has already answered itself. The real question, the one sitting heavy in his chest right now, is what he's going to do with it. And what they're beginning to realize now is something they can't ignore anymore. There's a specific kind of silence that exists between what someone feels and what they allow themselves to admit. It's not emptiness. It's actually the loudest silence there is, filled with everything that hasn't been said yet, everything that's been carefully folded up and tucked away, because the timing wasn't right, or the courage wasn't there, or because admitting it would mean everything changes. He's living inside that silence right now. And something about this moment, something he can't quite put his finger on, feels different than all the other moments he's tried to push through it. You have to understand something about where he's been emotionally these past weeks, maybe months. On the surface, his days have been full. That's been intentional. When you keep your calendar full, when you keep your hands busy and your mind occupied, you don't have to sit with the things that make you uncomfortable. That's not unique to him. Most people do this. It's one of the quietest forms of avoidance there is, and it's so socially acceptable that it doesn't even look like avoidance. It just looks like someone living their life. But life has a way of creating gaps, small ones, a cancelled plan, A slow afternoon. A night where sleep doesn't come easily, and the phone feels like too much, and the room feels too quiet. And in those gaps, in those unguarded, unscheduled moments, everything he's been outrunning catches up to him. That's been happening more frequently now, and each time it does, you're there. Not as a haunting, not as something painful, just present, like a truth he keeps returning to without meaning to. Stay with this, because this is where his inner world starts to become clearer. There's something he's been noticing about the relationship he's in. And again, this isn't about blame, it's about emotional honesty. He's been noticing a pattern. When things are light between him and the other woman, when life is easy and distraction is available, everything feels manageable, fine even. But the moment things slow down, the moment real depth is required, the moment he has to show up emotionally in a way that goes beyond the surface, something in him hesitates. He used to think that hesitation was just who he is, that he's someone who struggles with emotional depth in relationships. That's the story he told himself for a while. But lately that story has a hole in it. Because he remembers, and this is the part that's been quietly undoing him. He remembers that it wasn't always like that. There was a time when emotional depth didn't feel like effort, when being seen didn't feel like risk, when saying the real thing, the honest thing, the vulnerable thing, came more naturally, because the person on the other side of it made him feel safe enough to try. That person was you. He didn't fully appreciate what that meant when he had it. A lot of people don't. Safety feels ordinary when you're inside it. It's only when it's gone that you realize what it actually was. Not just comfort, but something rare. Something that isn't guaranteed to come around again just because you want it to. This is where understanding slowly begins. He had a conversation recently. Not about you, at least not directly, that stayed with him in a way he didn't expect. Someone close to him, a friend maybe, or just someone whose opinion he quietly respects, said something offhand. Something that wasn't even meant to be profound. But it landed. They were talking about something else entirely. And this person said, "The hardest thing isn't losing something. The hardest thing is realizing you had it and didn't know what to call it at the time." He didn't respond much in that moment. He just nodded, kept the conversation moving. But inside, something shifted. Because that sentence landed somewhere specific. It didn't just pass through him. It stuck. And the reason it stuck is because it described something he's been feeling, but hadn't found words for. He had something real. And he called it complicated, or he called it uncertain, or he called it bad timing, or he called it whatever made it easier to step away from. But what he didn't call it, what he wasn't ready to call it, was irreplaceable. And now that word is starting to surface. What happens next isn't loud, but it changes everything. Here's what's been happening in the quiet corners of his daily life. The moments nobody else sees. He'll be in the middle of something completely unrelated and a thought will surface. Not a grand thought, not an emotional spiral, just a simple, quiet question. I wonder how she's doing. And then he'll catch himself, redirect, keep moving. But the thought came, and the next day it comes again. And the day after that, it's not obsession. Don't misread this as someone who's consumed or unable to function. He's functioning. He's showing up to his life. But there's a thread, thin, persistent, almost invisible, that keeps connecting back to you. And no matter how many times he sets it down, it finds its way back into his hands. He's started to wonder if that thread is trying to tell him something, not in a dramatic, life-upending way. Just in that quiet way that genuine things tend to announce themselves. Not with thunder, but with a steady, patient presence that doesn't need to shout because it knows it's not going anywhere. If this is resonating, let it settle in you. You don't need to rush past it. Now here's the layer underneath all of this, and this is the part that he's only just beginning to touch. It's not just that he misses you. It's that being with someone else has shown him, in contrast, what was actually there between you two. That's the unexpected thing about moving on before you're ready. Sometimes the new chapter doesn't replace the old feeling. Sometimes it just illuminates it, holds it up to the light so you can see it more clearly than you ever could when you were inside it. He understands you differently now. That's significant. Not because you've changed, though you have, in ways that are real and worth honoring, but because his capacity to recognize what you were to him has grown. He was operating with a limited emotional vocabulary back then. He could feel things but couldn't always name them. He could sense that what you two had was different but couldn't articulate why, or what that difference deserved from him. He has more words for it now, more clarity. And with that clarity comes something that sits somewhere between gratitude and grief. And this is the part they're still sitting with. The other woman, let's be honest about this, senses something too. Maybe not specifically, maybe not in a way she could point to and name. But people in relationships almost always feel the places where their partner isn't fully present, even if they can't prove it, even if they'd never say it out loud. It shows up in small ways. The way someone responds just slightly slower than they should. The way their eyes go somewhere else for just a moment before coming back. The way a conversation touches something and they redirect it, gently but deliberately, away from whatever just surfaced. She's felt those moments. And she probably has her own quiet questions about what they mean. This isn't a situation with clean lines. That's the reality of it. Real emotional entanglement rarely is. He's not a villain in this. She's not a placeholder. You're not simply waiting. Everyone involved is a real person navigating something genuinely difficult, and the only way through something like this is with honesty. Eventually, inevitably, with honesty. But he's not at the honesty part yet. He's still in the part where he's trying to understand what's actually true for him, before he does anything with that truth. And the understanding is coming. Slowly. In layers. The way it always does when something real is finally being allowed to surface. There's a moment coming, and he can feel the edges of it even if he can't see its shape yet, where he's going to have to stop choosing the version of his life that looks right and start choosing the one that actually is right. Those two things have been drifting apart from each other for a while now, and the distance between them is getting harder to ignore. He doesn't know exactly what that moment looks like yet. He doesn't know what he'll say, or to whom or when, but something inside him is preparing for it, quietly, without fanfare, without a dramatic internal declaration, just a slow gathering of courage that tends to happen, right before someone is ready to be honest with themselves in a way they've been avoiding. You don't need to force this, and you don't need to rush toward it. But feel what's actually here, because what's here is real. And what's real doesn't stay buried forever. Not when it matters this much. Not when both people can still feel it across whatever distance has grown between them. He's closer to the edge of that moment than he realizes, and what begins to happen next, he genuinely did not see coming.